think we'd better get started. The numbers are still going up. I can just see the participants are still coming in, but they'll soon catch up. So we'll have a slow start, but I mean, this one is going to be blisteringly fast. You're going to find that this one is drinking from a fire hose type of presentation today. And I want to keep it going at pace because I want to give you enough theory and practical and inspirational case studies. And the difficulty that we have with just innovation is that it requires lots of theory, it requires lots of practice, and inspiration all come together in good measure. Now, there are many things that we can say about innovation, but the one thing that we know for sure is that not all innovations are good. The idea that we have to come across an idea and we think that the idea is good, we instantly fall in love with that concept and idea. And most times it's actually not. I mean, the questions that we're going to have to answer today is, where do you start with innovation? Why should I innovate? I mean, is innovation invention, or is innovation different? Is it just something that I can bring a little bit of extra value to the stuff that I'm doing currently? There's a new trend in town where we're going to collaborate with others to come up with inventions. And not all collaborations work. The act of collaborating does not create better outcomes all of the time. There are challenges around it, many of which are political and legal and intellectual knowledge and understanding. And then there's this whole emphasis that comes from innovation, which is the concept of how do we differentiate. And not all attempts to differentiate work. Differentiation for the sake of differentiation is not a good idea. What we're going to see is that innovation is fundamentally about looking for new customer problems or unmet needs. The place to start is not with ourselves, it's with the customer. And that has been a theme that has resonated throughout the last 3 previous weeks that have led up to this point. So far we have covered how to build a resistant, digitally innovative and resistant business, how to win in the digital economy with a mindset and strategic planning. Remember, we looked at the quadrants, we looked at how to become an industry authority, moving from attention to advocacy, the role that all had to play. We looked last week at preparing for AI, that not all AI innovations are necessarily good innovations. Most organizations aren't able to jump straight from where we are now to becoming an AI innovator. And this week, where we are, what we're looking at is how that innovation, leveraging the emerging technology in line with their strategy and with the right mindset, how that can lead to something great. Next week, we're looking at leveraging data. The difficulty we have with all of this is they're not separate topics. Innovation in the digital economy requires data, tomato. It requires that. So what we're going to do is you're going to see that I'm going to be crossing into next week's discipline, but without getting bogged down, without going into the real detail of the data. And remember, the data is only as effective as the question you ask from it. Now, what is the question? That's the hard part. Okay, the purpose of this webinar, just so everybody's clear, is to show you how digital innovators win. I mean, I was thinking about writing a more complicated purpose for this webinar, but if you leave here within 1 hour and understand there are ways in which different businesses win more than others, then that will have been a success. Because most organizations have access to capital. Interest rates have never been lower. The shock that the pandemic has caused has created more waves and windows of opportunity that the like of I have never seen. None of us have ever witnessed. So while there's shock to the system and we're still rebounding from the shock, that changed state creates windows of opportunity. And how do you spot them? And how do you get in front of those waves of opportunity? How do we adjust our businesses? And how do we innovate in order to maximize the opportunity? Well, I'm going to go back and start a little bit on mindset for this in this first stage, in the next 5, 6, 7 minutes. We're going to take a look at the mindset, because I believe a lot of entrepreneurship is about mindset. When we talk about we've access to the same capital, we have access to the same people, fundamentally. There's good people, while they're hard to come by, they tend to go work for the innovators, oddly enough, because they're more interesting places to work. And yet, access to adequate capital, access to adequate people, access to an environment with change. How come some businesses succeed better than others? Surely everybody should rise on that tide. Not so, says Nassim Taleb, is an intellectual risk analyzer, actually, but his books go beyond risk. They try to help identify the things that we don't even understand. What his main thrust and emphasis in his books is that most things that we try to predict are unpredictable, because the only thing that is predictable is that things will constantly change. So in his book called Anti-Fragile, he talks about 3 types of ecosystems, 3 types of organisms, 3 types of business types. And he calls them fragile, robust, and anti-fragile. He made up the word anti-fragile because there is no word in any language that he could find that related to what this truly meant. When we talk about fragile businesses, he would say that they're disproportionately harmed by unexpected shocks. These businesses can be good at what they do, but they're just not agile to deal with a curveball that gets thrown at them. The second kind is robust businesses. They stay the same, they survive, but they have capital reserves. They have enough business that will see them through, and they hunker down and they see it through, and then they hope that what they were doing before the shock resumes after the shock, which we've yet to see from the pandemic. And then he talks about the third kind, anti-fragile. Now, anti-fragile businesses seek disorder. They revel in the opportunity of change, put them under stress. But if given enough time to recover, you come back stronger. This creates better agility. It creates better abilities to handle uncertainty. There's businesses that are always in chaos. Chaos happens when there's lots of business mergers. There's not really any processes because they're constantly changing. Creativity gets killed. It's like a white knuckle ride. Where will we be next week? It's that constant frenetic, get it out the door mentality. Constantly get it out the door. That's a very frequent thing that I would have observed in Irish businesses. As long as we get it out the door and the customer's happy, another day survived, how does the balance sheet look? Let's move on. That's not good for creativity. There's businesses that have order. You know exactly what you want to do and how you're going to do it. You're an expert in what you do. You've perfected the best ways of doing it. And now you live in a comfort zone of just doing the great things that you're good at. And then there's the last, complexity. You are experiencing new depths that make you constantly feel uncomfortable. Your experience is constantly changing and your role is evolving. Complexity is what we would always have said is you need to seek. What is the complexity in the situation? Because with complexity, there are new problems to solve. And with new problems to solve, innovation flourishes. So you have to have the right mindset that I'm not going to be a slave to stagnation. I'm not going to continue to work in chaos. I'm not going to be comfortable with just being the best that I can at the subject matter expertise that I have. I'm going to constantly seek complexity. Now, we've covered this before, which is the culture of innovation is different to creating a new product or service. We start with the problem or unmet need. That's always the best idea. And we're going to look at that. How do you find that problem or unmet need? And it's not just by experience. There's more ways to it than that. Then comes ideas. We typically reward the idea, which is the wrong thing to do. The little ideas box that sit in offices, oh, we should put perfume in the bathrooms. Great. Lovely idea. But that is not going to create competitive advantage for our businesses. And usually it creates some kind of new order internally. Then you move to the next stage, which is creativity. Creativity is a practiced skill. It is not natural. It's naturally innate. but it requires practice, like learning a new language, like reading and writing, like painting on a canvas. Creativity requires practice. The more you practice, the better you get at it. From creativity, answering the problems or unmet needs, taking the good ideas, we then move to innovation. And that innovation we will go through in more detail throughout this presentation. And ultimately, where you want to get to is a business that is founded and based on innovation. When there is a problem, when there's complexity, when there is an opportunity for chaos and to tinker and to understand, the culture of innovation steps in to go, we are going to find the solution in this problem because there's lots of waves of change. And then how your business is built to handle that is really what will make the winners and losers. So these innovators that I'm talking about, they have nailed that stage 5. Most businesses think they're at stage 4 when the reality is they're at stage 2. They don't proactively practice creative thinking. I would ask you the question, what's your method? What's your chosen method for practicing creativity? A business perspective. And if the answer is it just can't happen, then it's at ideas. We're at number 2. So we need to, if we're at number 2, we need to get to number 3. And number 3 will lead to number 4. And it needs to make sure that number 1 is about identifying the problems. Now, why do we need to do this? It's because product life cycles are getting shorter. We've seen product life cycles, we've brought it up before, it's came out in the 1950s, this concept that when you introduce a product, it then grows over time, it then matures, and then it commoditizes, and then the profits and it declines. This has been brought up and regurgitated many times. Geoffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm. I could name dozens of books that have taken this bell curve and done different things with it. But the difference in the digital economy from the way things would normally work is that the time from when a concept is arrived at to a product or service is delivered has collapsed. I remember in my father's business, which is based in Armagh. Yeah, I know what you're thinking, best county in Ireland. But my father's business is based in Armagh. And it used to be that he had to go to China and go to Vietnam and other places to source the products and services of the products that he was going to sell back into the Irish and UK markets. And that used to take weeks of endeavor. Now it's dozens of web browsing, video conferencing. You still need to build the relationships. It doesn't mean there's no travel, but I mean, it used to be that he took a huge leap of faith that when he got there, that somebody he was arranged a meeting with by telephone or connection would show up. Now I can get whatever product or service I want designed in country in Belarus. I can get it manufactured in Vietnam. I can get it stored for drop shipping in Singapore, and I can do this in an afternoon. This is changing the product and even the services landscape so that the timeline from when you come up with the concept to you deliver it to the value curve is collapsing. This means we got to move faster. We looked last week, we've looked at all the weeks. This has been the core to what we've been doing, the 5 change blocks of digital transformation. And in those 5 change blocks, we have looked at digital mindset. We've looked at somewhere in the old area of communications. And I keep going back to communications. If I had a 6th module, this is what it would be. It would be around communications. But I know every time I put communications on the agenda, no one shows up. But it is as important as the technology. Here's the thing. Where do you start your innovations? You start it with the problem, the customer problem. Where is the customer problem identified? Oh, that would be in the strategy. So if the strategy isn't right, we'll see this idea of blue sky thinking, brainstorming, going to a hotel, coming up with good ideas. It's bullshit. It doesn't work. It doesn't create competitive advantage on the scale that we need. It needs to start at the diagnosis at the strategic end with the right mindset in the organization to know the unknown, which we will take a look at. When we get a culture of innovation and we're trying to get our innovation, if we cannot express the value we're going to bring, no one's going to buy it. Then when we get the idea and we can build it, it will be built with technology. And the idea, whether it's going to work or not, will be validated with data. So these things aren't separable. These things all have to come into play. The biggest mistake businesses are doing is that they think a good idea is innovation. We sell kitchen knives. What's our innovation this week? Sharper knives. Not an innovation. So you'll see that we will come back to this communications in a little bit more detail further down the line. I see someone, Deborah Loughlin, I'd show up for the communications one. She is the #1 communications person in Ireland. Deborah, if you want to look her up. Fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. What does that mean? Fixed mindset. Tried and tested analysis. We'll use the same methods. We will use low-risk ideas to create some kind of incremental change. We will manage risk, and we are forever writing business cases. We will have involved in big, high-risk waterfall delivery. What does that mean? Involved in big, high-risk waterfall delivery. We tend to say, right, we're going to shift systems. Buy a new system, out with the old, in with the new. It's an innovation. Is it? Is it fixing a new customer problem or unmet need? There's an unwillingness to embrace change, so we stick with what we know. This is the mindset part that we look, where we need to get out of that stagnation phase and the chaotic phase. We need to be able to change our own mindset for it. Prone to failure when we meet new horizons. We're meeting new horizons. A growth mindset wants to deeply understand customers' needs. They're changing right now. 9% of people in a YouGov poll say they want to go back to the old ways after the pandemic. Their needs have changed. Want to explore growth opportunities. We want to act quickly, invest low, scale it when it works. We seek new horizons, get people out of our comfort zone. We embark on a journey of learning and adaptation. So, is your business going to reward someone if they try to do something? They learn lots, but it doesn't work because that's managed risk. We look for hidden growth opportunities, empathy-based. The growth mindset is essential for a culture of innovation. Now, you don't have to get this mindset right to embark on digital innovation. It will come, but it will only come if leadership brings it to the fore. It's not going to happen by accident. Let's take a look now at something that we've already taken a look at, which was strategy, which is where we create the competitive advantage. This is what Richard Rummel said in Richard Rummel, by the way, is UCLA professor of strategy. He said, strategy comes from identifying one or two of the critical issues in the situation, pivotal points that can multiply the effectiveness of effort, and you focus and concentrate your actions and resources on them. What he was saying is that strategies are not long-term 3-year plans. Vision is where we're going. Strategy is the near-term challenges. So we're going to enter a new market. What are the near-term challenges? Well, if we were to create a new product, would a customer buy it? How could you prove that? You get the communications people on board. You test the value proposition, and you then try and see if anybody would buy it before you even make it. And in the digital economy, that's quite easy to do. I mean, how many people are searching for products and services that aren't being fully delivered by competitors? Can you get the data for that? That gives me a good opportunity, but I need to test it. And the reason I need to test it is that if nothing comes of it, then there's no point. The vision isn't going to be completed. I have to do something else. The strategy changes. So we're going to take a look at the idea again that if you don't diagnose the problem, this is the customer's problem, you don't give guiding policy, and you don't take coherent action, then nothing will change. So I've been asked a question, how would you advise looking for growth opportunities? We will get to that. You need to diagnose the customer's problem or unmet need. So when I talk about unmet need, if my wife wanted a new diamond ring, it's not a problem. It's a problem for me, not a problem for her. It's an unmet need. But knowing where customers' problems reside takes real effort, real diagnosis. And we're going to take a look at that right now. So how do you look for new growth opportunities? We need to understand fundamentally the customer's problems. And then we can utilize data. Then we can utilize data to validate that idea. But now the difficulty is diagnosing problems is not just you going up and asking a customer, what's your problem? Oh, I've got a backache. That's not, you can't approach it like that. But the leader's role is to diagnose, to come up with guiding policy, what we could do to solve it, and then coherent action is taken to solve that. Without diagnosis and guiding policy, we just get incoherent action. Random acts of digital. Strategy isn't about upgrading as usual. This is Michael Porter, the famed Harvard lecturer who argues that operational effectiveness, although necessary, so it's inside your business, bringing in new CRM platforms, ERP platforms, email marketing platforms, they're operational effectiveness issues. Although necessary to superior performance, it's not sufficient because its techniques are easy to imitate. In contrast, the essence of strategy is choosing a unique and valuable position rooted in systems and activities that are more difficult to match. So if we're even going to be strategic, according to Porter, we need to have business as usual running over here. Now we're looking for new customer problems, pains, or unmet needs, which are going to be solved in systems and activities that are difficult to match. We looked last week at the quadrant. Each color had a growth profile. The yellow one is slow, which is where most businesses are based. The blue one is preferable, an industry authority, where the blue one is the industry authority. The yellow one is advocacy, which is handshake, growth by handshake. If you want to become an industry authority, you need to innovate. We looked at propulsion. We've looked at it for 3 weeks. Propulsion will give you a good idea if you're in that industry authority zone or not. Coming up with commentary about your industry does not make you an authority. Innovation, inventing, changing your industry does. Changing your industry and how people act and perceive it is the route to authority. The problem we had about going across to attention is it's paid ads. Usually you reach a point where the cost of acquisition is greater than the transactional value of the deal. Then we have the prime players. We're not going to go back over that. That route from advocacy to authority is powered fundamentally by deliberate innovation. Not your commentary, not your opinion, innovation. The act of changing a business. So where do we start? We have to start with diagnosis. And diagnosis is quite often misunderstood. This guy is driving down the road and his car breaks. And the reason his car breaks is because of the fan belt. The fan belt is broken. So the diagnosis of the situation, in normal ways, we would go, find the problem, it's the fan belt. But if we're seeking to innovate, we need a two-stage approach. And this two-stage approach is incredibly human. It's not something that you can outsource. It's not something you can do by survey. It's something that you can only do eyeball to eyeball, like we are now. The reason is that you have to start off with poking the box. Why did the fan belt break? We asked the gentleman. Well, the fan belt broke because I haven't serviced my vehicle. Why have you not serviced your vehicle? Well, I haven't serviced my vehicle because I lost my job. Why did you lose your job? Because my job was no longer relevant. Why was it no longer relevant? Because a technological platform removed my need. Why did that happen? Because I wasn't able to reposition myself. Why were you not able to reposition yourself? Because I don't have the education. The solution to the fan belt is that he needs education. Not a fan, he needs a fan belt too. But fixing the fan belt won't stop the engine from breaking again. He can't afford to fix it. That deep diagnosis takes time. If I was given 2 weeks to come up with an innovation, I would spend 1 week and 3 days on diagnosis. So why is this human? Because when you start to poke the box and ask questions, that why opportunity doesn't always present itself. What's wrong with your car? It's broken down. Why? Oh, it's rubbish. You need to keep poking. You need to keep poking in order to find it. So usually where we start, and it's not the right place, is that there's few unmet needs that require another process-driven mobile app. Most businesses pat themselves on the back and feel rewarded for having produced yet another app, even though it doesn't end up being something that the customer adopts. Here's diagnosis, direction, and determination. This is in accordance with the strategic aims. Diagnosis is your job is to ask questions in order to diagnose the ground truth of the situation. Guiding policy, your second job is to give guiding policy. Test leap of faith assumptions. Oh, if I give him a new fan belt, that would solve the problem. That's a leap of faith. We don't actually know. How would you test that? How would we test that? And the innovation starts coming when you start to test these assumptions. Coherent action, your third job, is to determine how you will accomplish these tasks, how you will identify the leap of faith assumptions, and how you accomplish those tasks. Here's green telecoms versus white telecoms. This could be banks, this could be any industry. I just took something that everybody understands. Two businesses, this is a true story, grounded in a true story. Started in 2005, similar products, consumer and business market, solid management teams, they're growing well. 3 years into their development, we check in. White telecom is outpacing green telecom by 20%. Why could that be? Well, you then go forward and we see greens are now in decline. And we diagnose the situation as being, well, if you want to set up an account with greens, it takes you 1 day, whereas whites, you can just do it online. If you want products for the business, they sell SIM cards with data, where whites have diversified and they've now got data and digital cloud solutions. Consumers, we're retail. We're still based around, greens are still based around just retail, where whites have gone blended with e-commerce. You can order online and pick up in store and just get it delivered. Branding, they both run large, one's running large advertising campaigns and the other's limited spend. So now what? Well, the natural instinct is to fix it all. Account setup, fixed. Products and services, we're doing the same as whites. Consumers, blended e-commerce, we've done it. We're running large ad campaigns, they're running large ad campaigns. Perfect. That should solve everything. It does. It stops the blood loss, but their growth, 0.2%. Why? Because there's no compelling reason for customers to go back. There's no compelling reason for a customer to shift again. You are now the slower version of what the industry expects. Now, this could have been foretold. Claire Christensen wrote a book called The Innovator's Dilemma. In it, he talked about two types of innovation: sustaining innovation and disruptive innovation. The old Xerox, for those who are old enough to remember, and I'm sure very few of you are, but sustaining innovation, Xerox created a photocopier. Was it the best in the market? No. Hewlett-Packard came at them, IBM, faster. Hewlett-Packard, more bendy. One stable, next one's color. Did it unseat Xerox? Nope. Because they had become the prime player in the marketplace. And no amount of innovation in that marketplace against the prime player would unseat them. They just said, thank you, I'll take that idea. And they stayed the prime player. The only way that they were able to out-innovate was this poor thing, Canon copier. The Canon copier was slower. The Canon copier smelly. It sat at the end of your desk, but it was three things. It was more affordable, effective, and convenient. And it reached a new market. Because what happens with innovations is this, according to Christensen. This is the mainstream market. This is the blue line here. It says mainstream. This is the products and features your customers care about. You then find that from this part here, where the customer enters and you come in, they love all the products and features. They love it. They love it. They love it. Okay. Actually, I really don't care. You've made it faster. Speed was never my issue. It might end up heading towards a high-end market. Sure. There might be some people in that faster widget. Sure. But the mainstream market doesn't. There is a breaking point where creating the exact same functions in the bank or in a telecoms provider or in a pharma company or with anything else, there is a breaking point at which the customer doesn't care anymore. You've over-innovated it. So where does the market opportunity come from? It's this lower end of the market where you come up with a new idea. Does it have all the features and benefits? Nope. What does it do? Solves one new problem. So when we get in, it's not that many customers that want it, but they start to like it and they'll take on the new products and features. This is how Zoom grew. I remember Zoom when it first started. You just did video conferencing. It was one button. That's all it did. And it's grown and grown and grown as this entrant disruptive technology. And it then takes over the mainstream, challenges the big players. But it won't be challenging the big players going head to head with the big players. Affordable, effective, and convenient. You start to see if that happens in what you're doing, it tends to create disruption in the market. So the wrong way to approach this is to start off with an idea, build a business case, invest, build a product, and then go to the customer. The right way to do this is we start off with a customer's pain or unmet need. We have to look for that through diagnosis. We then have to make sure it aligns with our strategy. Number 3 is it must have commercial legs. Number 4, we need a minimum viable product. We need to test it. And then number 5, you build a business case. Not until the data is in, not until the test is done. The wrong way to do this again is divergent innovation. Divergent innovation is where you start off with a newer emerging technology. I'm going to use AI. Yeah, to solve what problem? And then going to create an MVP. Then I'll seek the problem and then I get the splattering of new ideas coming out of the business. There's another new trend that is very much in vogue, which is this idea of collaborative innovation. If you're in a mature market, it is unlikely that you will continue to find new areas in where to innovate. Closed innovation is where we do it all in-house. We've got this covered. Thanks very much. Collaborative is where you seek business partners and look for a crossover in what they do. So the bank and the mobile phone company, let's just take that for 1 second. The bank, mobile phone company, go and talk to an agricultural company. Well, the mobile phone company has telemetry data that can manage drones. The bank can finance the new initiative. The agricultural company can do the seed dispersal. Now we've got a new opportunity that comes from collaboration that would never present itself if we hadn't collaborated. We haven't time to go into open innovation, but we will be coming back to collaborative innovation. So to answer Andrea Logue's question of how do you find these problems or unmet needs, there's 6 clear ways in which this can be done. The star represents its level of difficulty. The data detective starts with the data stuff that we'll be doing next week and starts to take a look at where the opportunity may be. It's the easiest, but the health warning with this is if you start looking at data without a question to ask, it will tell you nothing. You will spend weeks rambling around the spreadsheet in the lost zone. The journalist is where you interview customers. Health warning. Who deals with customers? Salespeople. Ask a salesperson what the customer wants. Oddly, it's always more salespeople. They really value the salesperson we have. Remove the salespeople and automate and digitize in many respects. Move the salespeople to higher level functions. The customer actually prefers that. So when we talk about interviewing the journalist, we talk about interviewing the customer, not the salesperson who interviews the customer. The impersonator, you pretend you are one of these people. You live the life, you walk in their shoes. The anthropologist, you start to study everything that they do. You follow them around. The scientist, the co-creator. So these are the scientists. The purpose of the scientists is you start to come up with new products and services. You show them to customers. You help them do the formulation with the customer. The co-creator is where you take on the multiple partners, that cross collaboration across industries. So these are big picture ways in which you can start your innovations. The data detective, which is next week's work, is one of the key core components of that. I want to go back to a second because we talked about strategy and how we find the stuff. And I'm going to look at some case studies now to bring all of this together for you. But the part that we still want to be able to look at, which we haven't given enough credence to, is the communications. Understanding the communications. A really easy way to know if you're an industry authority. If you are an authority, the blue square. Remember, blue square, big growth. continued growth. The easy way to know that is if you can fill out the sentence. Now, I've got a rule for the sentence. It must be concrete. We are the only business in retail something or other. Because we do what better than anyone else? We're the fastest growing business in Ireland for online retail. Because we do the 4-hour delivery better than anyone else. And I mean, you see that what we do bit, it cannot be rules. These are against the rules. It cannot be because we have the best people. Well, everybody else has got bad people. We're the only ones with good people. It's a bit arrogant. And we see this a lot in services and legal services and accounting practice. Our people is what makes us different. Well, when it comes to the digital world, it is an assumption you have good people. It is an assumption that you can deliver good products and services. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in business. Now, what are we going to do that's going to make us different? What is this point of differentiation? Because we need this point of differentiation if we're going to drive up to authority. If you can't write that, then we can't become that authority. You can't articulate it. And then the second part to it is, when you do it, does the customer care? Here we're going to take a look at a little bit more detail on this about communication and linking it with data. I need to bring this up because innovation, communication, and data tell a wonderful story. This is a true story about a business that followed the nonsense that is constantly put out on the web, that if you want to be an authority, you've got to have commentary. You've got to blog. You've got to explain what you do, and you just write articles and you publish those articles, and the articles lead to sales. In most cases, this is what happens when you don't have an innovation. We can spend weeks and weeks and weeks creating content because the digital marketers told us to, and it leads to no sales. Not always, but very often if it's without innovation. You give me the innovation, I'll write content all day that people will want to see. You give me no innovation, no creative points of differentiation, no way to fill out that sentence, I'm going to struggle. The world doesn't need another web page, blog, vlog, or any Facebook tweet that just talks about, if you're a bank, your interest rates, or if you're a telecoms company, talks about your number of minutes. Those are not innovations. They're expectations. Here's what happens. Here's how it's borne out in data. Here's a small business. I'm looking at the Google Analytics. They've got 4,000 clicks. They've got about 100 sales inquiries. They have 1 million impressions on their content. 1 million, 1 million. That's coming up from organic search. 1 million. This is a true story. They can see over time, organic search is 63% of the traffic overall that they're getting through to their site. But when we start to do a thing looking at how people or how new opportunities are acquired, we see that one of these channels called direct, they typed your name into a browser directly, or they clicked on a referral link, is 27% and 74% of the attribution of how you got that opportunity. Now, the mathematicians among you are going, hold on there. That's over 100%. We give credit if someone came through an organic search at any point. It's called attribution modeling. I'll attribute some of it to organic search, some of it to direct, some of it to referral. Referral means I read about you on somebody else's website and it came through. And when we then take a look at the types of people that inquire, what kind of journey they had, I can see that for this conversion, people came direct. So they typed in my web address twice before they even made an inquiry. Oh, there's some people typed it in 3 times. Some people typed it in 5 times. Some people typed it in, found my article on another third-party website, and then came back and came through and then made the inquiry. Some people started with the referral on a third-party website and then came through. But only when we get to number 9 is organic search and the 1 million click-throughs or impressions even starting to show in people who are turning up at my front door to buy something. This is in a business-to-business scenario. The data tells me that the content that I'm producing may be getting read. It's not producing customers. It's not getting value. It's not creating value for me. There's no innovation. It lacks innovation, and the data tells me so. So we will do this next week. We will take a look at some extra data sources. But the diagnosis of my situation here, by looking at what it takes to convert, is that all that content and all of that writing, you could argue, well, it has a bigger picture to play, but it ain't producing the people who are paying. That's for sure. There's a guy called James Leckie. He's based in Lisburn. James actually makes postural care for kids that have cerebral palsy. He decided that he wanted to create something new and innovative and exciting. And he decided that after looking at this, that he wanted to do a collaborative innovation. He sought a partnership with Cerebra. Cerebra are a head injuries charity. And he asked them, could they really help him to go through and see what it was going to take from the customer's pain perspective. They did the deep diagnosis. The customer came back saying, I can't take my child who is unable to walk shopping. I can't put them on a swing. I can't get them their needs dealt with quickly. It has to be breaking down the big seats. So he came up with this innovation. He then brought it to the marketplace and created a strategy around it. He looked to create the distinction between using a unique value proposition, and he filled out the sentence. The sentence didn't quite work for him in the first place because he said, we want to be pioneers in early participation therapy for children with special needs because we produce affordable, clinically excellent products better than anyone else. Parents, who are the customers, didn't know what affordable, clinically excellent products were. And also, it was used all over the web already, early participation therapy. So he changed the value proposition and tested it again. We are pioneers in child participation therapy, a new made-up wave for children with special needs because we make stuff that involves the family in helping the child engage in life better than anyone else. He takes the idea of which he could have gone into attention modeling, put it onto like the Amazon for seating for postural care, SEO, PPC, display ads. He could have done that, but he chose not to. He chose a different route. He chose to go an authority route because he knew he was opening up a new wave of opportunity. In that wave, he had to narrow his value proposition down to what we looked at. It's one of the first things that you have to do. And then he created the plan where he had to resolve channel conflict, all of those things that need to happen when you're creating that route to being an industry authority. And the idea of being an industry authority, you cannot become an authority by you saying what you do is great. And an industry authority comes from when others say you're great. We've covered this before. So my mum telling you that I'm a great lad wouldn't take too much persuasion to make that happen. But it would if I wanted an industry magazine to give an independent review and say it was great. So he puts this out to the market through Cerebra, through his collaborative innovation partner, and all of a sudden these photographs start appearing on social media. The photographs are kids that are engaging in life better than anyone else. And this little boy is able to hold onto a hose and his young sister brings him around for a walk. And I mean, the stories are really good. What's interesting is the data. The data shows that he is getting 18,000 visitors and it's mainly coming through social media, not bribing people who have strong social media footprints, but because people genuinely want to share it. Why do people genuinely want to share stuff? Because it's new, it's innovative. They award you for your innovation by sharing it. Industry publications talk about it. So we are proud to announce a new CEO. Oh, there will be no bounce with that. We are changing the industry because we're not going to go back and do it the same way. Here's the new way and everybody loves it. Yeah, actually, I believe that. You'll see that will resonate. So communications of your innovations will result in data changes in the digital economy that are traceable. There's a twist to this tale. The twist is that on one day, it went from 18,000, that's for a month. One day, it jumps to 200,000. Social goes wild, lots of direct, lots of referral, hasn't paid for an ad. What could it have been? Usually people go, well, somebody famous publicized it. Nope, innovated again. Came up with the UPSI, launched the UPSI, spoke to the collaborators, invited them over from all of the bloggers. They had now built trust because he was not going to launch the product. His partners and those he had built circles of trust with were going to start talking about it. They were involved in the design process. They were involved in the execution of this. Now, this happens, and 200,000 people happen to show up in the digital economy, in the digital world. UTV catches wind of it, says we're going to run a little short piece on this. Then what happens next is that these beautiful, beautiful, beautiful children all of a sudden start making appearances on national media, international media, and 1,000 PR company needs to be brought in to handle the 1,200 media interview requests. He ends up on BBC's Good Morning programs talking about this. And all of the time, James did collaborative innovation with the mother of one of the children, and he kept giving her credit. And of course, the story rolls again and again. There's a child that couldn't have walked down the aisle. Now you're going, but it's a very soft story. It's a lovely story. It's a heartwarming story. He could have put it into Special Tomato website and gone with PPC and SEO. He strategically chose not to, and he strategically decided he wanted to be a digital innovator. When you ask James, what's the difference about being a digital innovator and just doing digital? Here's the 5 pieces of advice. Maybe it's 6. This is the last slide, I promise. Questions, by the way. Any questions, start sticking them up. This is the last slide. When we're doing digital, we focus on our own website, social, IT to deliver existing services. When we're a digital innovator, strategy, culture that promotes no blame, constant experimentation. If we focus from communications, focus on short-term goals, targets, and projects instead of constantly articulating the new organizational vision and how to get there. Processes to ensure compliance and reduce risk is what we would normally have done instead of processes for change and scored cycles of innovation, creating that innovation, being able to foster creativity. We are customer focused and creative. Everybody is. Everybody is customer focused. Everyone. Co-creating new products and services with customers and partners. Now, there's a change. Few people are. Digitizing existing products or services. Doing digital, remember we've seen this before, you've got to kind of do that. But once that's done, you've got to reimagine your organization really before implementing technology. And instead of striving for likes, because the number of likes never goes down, it's a fake metric. Likes have no correlation with sales. We default to data-driven decision-making, like we've looked at. That's today's in a nutshell. I think we're right on time. We're right on time. And what it shows us, the takeaways that I want you to take away from this is that innovation can leverage data, but really it starts with customer pains or unmet needs. If you do not have an identified customer pain or unmet need, and that's usually because you're in mature markets. Mature markets, you kind of squeeze the juice as hard as you can go. There's nothing left. Everybody's done whatever can be done. So we just make an app to keep up with everybody else. You then need to completely change the mindset about how we're going to innovate the next phase. The innovations can then be tested. You don't bet the farm. You take resources, you put them in, you look for the diagnosed problems, you then take those problems and you experiment with them. The experiments produce data and you follow the data. And when we do that, that gives us multiple opportunities to find the pathfinding to the vision. The strategy is short term, the vision is for the long term. We know where we need to go, and we're driven not by subjectivity, not by that blog, that was shared a lot, by the data and what did it actually compile and help us lead to. Anything or nothing. And if it's not going to give us the outcome we want, you gotta just suck it up. This whole idea of we've invested, therefore we must still invest. So I'm going to go for questions here. Is James Leckie stuck in an innovation loop? How does James leap to prime? And can he afford 18 to 24 months for each new product launch? No, he can't, Gareth. That's a great question. James started in advocacy and moved up to authority with his first product. So how does he challenge Prime? All of the people who are constantly making these older school systems for kids with cerebral palsy, they may actually still exist. He's now making stuff that you don't go sell into the health service, you sell it direct to the parent. This wasn't possible before because the only route to the parent was directly through the doctor. So he sees a new business model that's opening up. He sees a new market that's opening up. And then he decides this is the part that I'm going to fulfill on it. It's very narrow. It's helping kids engage in life better than anyone else. And then he innovates and innovates and innovates. Now that authority, you'll see, goes from niche, then it starts to become mainstream. It starts to become the accepted wisdom. It starts to become the product or tool that everybody defers to because everybody starts to use it. And you innovate your way in. And what actually happens is the older products and services stop getting used. So is he in a perpetual loop? I hope so. That's the difference between innovation and culture of innovation. And does he do it every 24 months? You'll see that the story is more complicated than that. There are many products we've brought out, didn't work, shelved, 3 weeks. Why? They were never made. The design, the illustration was put out to see what customers would react. Did anybody add it to their basket? 6 people. What happened to 6 people? We made custom versions and sent it to them and don't make any more. I mean, I'm not quoting what actually happened here, but what I'm trying to say is there's ways around solving those problems. We must have it. We must have the whole supply chain set up before we can make it. Same with services. You go and you make a product, you put it live, you see if you can get the attention, you can see if you can write the value proposition, you see if it encourages phone calls, you see if you can reach new customers. And if the answer is that you can't, don't make it. It ain't going to work. Don't bet the farm on it. What is your advice for people who have lots of Google Analytics data? What are the obvious things to prioritize analyzing? Richard, that's a great question. And here is the answer. I see this a lot. People, no shortage of data. The point that they have is that they have a shortage of questions. And where do the questions come from? The questions come from the strategic planning. They come from the strategy. The strategy is diagnosis, guiding policy, and coherent action. The diagnosis is what is it the customer's problem is. Once you understand the customer's problem, you then go and try and validate it again through data. Data in itself tells you nothing. Strategy determines your competitive advantage, which data will then inform. So all the time we see it, people starting off with the data, and I know that I'm suspecting that week 5 will be the busiest. More people will want to attend week 5 because I want to see the data. I want to be able to examine my data. And my answer to that is you will get nothing out of it unless you know what questions you want to ask. So I would be saying, here's the question and here's the answer. And that can be inspiring. But usually the real innovators are sitting going, I think customers might want this. How could we test? How could you build a minimum viable product? How could you put it online? How could we drive enough customers to it? How could we see what the conversion rates are? How could we see what the cost of acquisition is? How can we see if anybody's looking for it? How could we create a new industry vertical? Is that what we want to do? And with winds of change like there are now, that is the time to do it. Can you win just with innovation and not a culture of innovation? It depends on the competitive nature of the market you're in. I mean, all of this stuff has to be put into context, which is what we actually do. We're launching a course. The course is going to be sponsored by Skillnet. The course is where you go through all of this. What is it you want? What is it the customer wants? What does the marketplace have? How do you displace them? Can you displace them? Have you got the resources? Where are you now? Where are you going to? And if you can't answer these questions, that's your strategy. Answer the questions. If we don't know what our proposition is, we can't compete and displace someone who's already in that market, or there is no market and no search volume for it. It's going to be very hard to grow. I mean, it's all going to be preaching at events. So you'll be able to see and diagnose this through proper frameworks. So there's a deep dive course on 25th to 27th of May. That's when it's on. Jared Cox, have you any suggestions, strategy around creating collaboration with other companies? Sometimes there's shared new IP. How do you decide to gain ownership on that IP? That's a good one. That's actually what prevents larger companies. I just mentioned about a telecom provider. They can tell what height something's at sub 500 meters better than anything else, telecoms company. But they have to work then with insurance companies about autonomous vehicles and their new insurance. Well, who owns the intellectual property around that? And so this is why the innovations require leadership. So usually what I would say is, see all that idea of ownership and leadership, have a memorandum of understanding, but don't worry about it. Because the hardest part is not dividing up the spoils and the wins. It's finding the actual problem that the customer's going to pay for in the short, medium, or long term. And there are different ways to do this. We haven't time to go into it, where we take a look about innovating inside what we do. Then there's adjacent innovation, and there's disruptive innovation. There's different methods for that. But alas, in 45 minutes, we don't have time. I'll finish by just saying that we're on next week again. There is a bigger course that's coming up, which is going to run over 3 days. We're going to, there are a sequence of webinars that are going on the Technology Ireland website. Please look them up. There are, every day of the week, there's stuff going on. Until next week, my jolly friends, I hope you enjoy yourselves, and I will see you for the last in the webinar series.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this webinar, please follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn to be kept up to date with all our news, events and programmes. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos like this one.